I'm sure you all remember back in either middle or high school when a certain book series got extremely popular, and then suddenly everybody had a copy, at least of the first one. A book about gods and monsters and heroes, all told through the perspective of a 12-year-old. And even if your opinion on the book has changed in the years since, back then we all did think it was cool. So, as you've all picked up, I'll be critiquing Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. Over the course of my speech, I'm going to break down three of the reasons that make this book so divisive. First, its inaccuracies. Second, its subversion of myth via perspective. And finally, its pacing. Let's get right into it then. First, we have the glaring inaccuracy. Hades is not evil or a villain. He barely shows up in mythology and generally as a guy who is there while some hero tries to get something from the underworld. It would be better to describe him as the caretaker of the Greek afterlife than as the devil. Any connotations to the contrary of that were made well after the Greek Orthodox Church took over. On a lesser note, Ares was portrayed a little bit off. As in, he was portrayed to be more competent than he was in the myths. Yeah. It does make him a better supporting character, but it's off from his role as the Olympian family disappointment. As in, he once got kidnapped and stuffed in a jar for over a year because the Olympians couldn't be bothered to look for him. He puts on a much better showing in the novel, I promise. Next, this book subverts classical myth structure by giving us an interesting third-person perspective. In classical myths, we get the third-person perspective of Hercules showed up and did the amazing thing. Our grand hero who can never fail, that we don't see the thoughts of, just the amazing deeds. In Riordan's novel, we get a panicky 12-year-old in the place of a Greek hero. We also get to see Percy's thoughts, being the 12-year-old Percy. And generally his thoughts are, oh please no, I don't want to die. I have to jump off a bridge to escape a monster? I'm 12! Thankfully, that never devolves into outright angst, and this is put succinctly by Prieta Salier in his review of the book, which said, amazingly, Percy seems to be mostly free of self-pity and angst while still staying young and believable. Now finally, we get to the novel's pacing, which reviews on Powell's Bookstore and Amazon call perfectly fast-paced. And that does appeal to its target audience, teenagers. However, as I got older, I found that reading Percy Jackson got mentally exhausting. A fast-paced novel is great when you're at an age or in a mood for action, 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 action from start to finish. But sometimes I just want, like, a break, because being able to empathize with the character is important. Riordan does that very well. But doing that with a novel where you're exhausting both your character and your reader is difficult to pull off well. In conclusion, this novel is divisive for a few reasons. Its inaccuracies hurt my inner mythology researcher, but give an overall better story. That's hard for me to say. Seeing the perspective of a 12-year-old in the position of a classical Greek hero adds to the relatability of the protagonist and the humor of the story, but it He's freaky because that is a 12-year-old in the position of a classical Greek hero. Yikes. And finally, because the pacing is great for some teenagers and people who are into really high energy action books, but not great for others. People like me who'd like a rest stop between now and the point.